In the twilight of Chicago, when the city begins to shimmer with the lights of evening skyscrapers, in a luxurious but cold mansion on the outskirts of the metropolis, Caroline felt a thin crack beginning to penetrate the established routine of her life. The house, with its perfectly polished floors, massive furniture, and carefully selected works of art, was the embodiment of success and status, but for Caroline, it had long become an empty shell, devoid of true warmth and vitality. On that night, as the wind softly rustled outside, Caroline sat in the spacious living room, framed by the soft light of lamps and the reflections of city lights. Her gaze wandered through the faceless room, filled with shadows of memories of who she once dreamed of being. Inside her, feelings clashed. On one hand, familiar safety and predictability. On the other, an unquenchable desire to awaken the long-extinguished fire of passion and true self-expression. Caroline remembered how in her youth, her heart beat in time with adventures and romantic dreams, how she boldly sought out every moment filled with life. Now, after years of silent existence in the golden cage of marriage with Richard, a successful but distant businessman, she felt her soul languishing in anticipation of change. Every breath she took was filled with a subtle sense of loss, and every glance was filled with hope that perhaps it was not too late to regain the life she had lost in the routine of obligations. Richard, occupied with endless business conversations and reports, left her alone with her thoughts and fears. In the evening, when the house sank into quiet solitude, Caroline increasingly found herself drifting far beyond the familiar framework. Her inner monologue grew louder. When was the last time I felt my heart filled with vitality? When did I allow myself to dream, to love, and to be loved? These questions, like echoes of long-forgotten feelings, resonated through the empty rooms of the mansion, making her feel both inner pain and a quiet but relentless drive for change. Outside, the night city continued to pulse with its relentless energy, reflecting the contrasts of life. Here in this silent mansion, there was an apparent harmony, but behind the facade of perfect external order lay a deep emotional drama. Caroline sat by the window, her gaze sliding over the flickering streetlights, and in each one, she saw a possibility, a chance for a new life. Images of long-forgotten dreams, when she was bold and full of life, when every morning began with a belief in miracles rather than predictable routine, arose in her mind. At that moment, as the sounds of the night city merged with her inner tremor, Caroline felt something inside her beginning to change. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible awakening, like a gentle breeze that makes the tablecloth flutter on a cold morning. She realized that she could no longer remain a prisoner of others' expectations and routine obligations, that her soul yearned to be heard, seen, and to taste real life. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a spark of determination lit up in her eyes. She understood that this evening had become a starting point, a moment when the familiar began to crack under the pressure of an inner need for change. Caroline pondered, maybe it's time to regain those feelings I've longed for so long. Maybe I should start living for myself, not for others' expectations. These thoughts were both frightening and exhilarating, as they meant risk, the risk of destroying everything that seemed eternal and unchanging. In the deep silence of her room, surrounded by the cold but majestic walls of the mansion, Caroline allowed herself to feel a real surge of emotions for the first time. In her heart, a conviction was already growing that change was inevitable, that even in this apparent emptiness, a path to new, vibrant sensations could be found. And although the night continued to envelop the city in its mysterious haze, Caroline's soul was illuminated with understanding. It was time to awaken desires, to regain her lost self, and to start living as she once dreamed. That night marked the beginning of her inner journey, a journey from silent routine to a world where every feeling has meaning, where every dream can come alive and shine brighter than ever before. On that evening, Chicago was enveloped in a soft twilight. In the luxurious hotel where the corporate gala evening was held shimmered with lights, as if inviting guests into a world of refined elegance and hidden passions. Caroline, still enveloped in a light sense of inner emptiness, entered the hall where high ceilings, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and perfectly polished marble floors created an atmosphere of genuine grandeur. But even amidst the glitter and splendor of the exterior decor, she felt something else stirring within her, a subtle call to change, an opportunity to feel alive again. Among the guests dressed in elegant suits and exquisite dresses, her gaze accidentally met Dylan's. He stood out not only with his confidence, but also with a calm charisma that attracted attention like a magnet. His presence was barely perceptible but powerful, like a soft whisper awakening long-forgotten feelings. At that second, time seemed to stop. Between them flashed a lightning bolt of mutual understanding, and at that moment, Caroline felt a spark ignite under the weight of daily routine, promising change. Dylan, with a slight smile and a gaze full of unspoken mystery, approached closer. His steps were confident, and his movements graceful and natural. Every movement, every accidental touch or exchange of glances with Caroline seemed filled with special meaning. In the din of conversation and music filled with light jazz motifs, a tension arose between them that carried the promise of forbidden closeness and the possibility of experiencing something more than just another acquaintance. Caroline, immersed in her thoughts and memories of the life she dreamed of in her youth, felt a feeling awakening in her heart that had long been extinguished by routines and mundanity. Her inner voice, previously drowned in silent longing, now spoke louder. It whispered that every moment could be the beginning of a new life, if only she dared to accept the temptation, if only she allowed herself to feel passion and warmth. In this hall, where every detail seemed created to emphasize status and grandeur, Caroline felt her soul yearning for freedom and true contact with the world. Moments filled with quiet seduction gave way to moments of mutual glances where something more than mere curiosity arose between Caroline and Dylan. Their gazes spoke of long-abandoned dreams and an insatiable thirst for change. And although the atmosphere of the evening remained just as impeccable and polished, a new reality was born within Caroline. A reality where every meeting, every touch could be the first step on the path to awakening long-submerged desires. Thus, amidst the luxurious elegance and sparkle, amidst the rustle of evening conversations and soft jazz, a quiet but powerful process of change began. Caroline realized that this evening was not just another event, but an opportunity to look at her life from a different angle, to see in herself that spark that could ignite the flame of new sensations and perhaps turn everything that seemed unchanging upside down. The late evening gradually gave way to the quiet nocturnal calm when Caroline, returning home after the gala evening, found herself alone with her thoughts. The rooms of the mansion, where elegance and brilliance had previously reigned, now became silent witnesses to her inner struggle. In every corner, in every shadow, her uncertainty and growing desire, which she found so difficult to accept, were reflected. She sat by the large window, looking into the darkening sky, and tried to catch the sounds of her own soul, which suddenly became so loud that they drowned out the familiar rustle of the streets. Memories of the meeting with Dylan surfaced in her consciousness, like old film reels scattered in the darkness of memory. She remembered how his confident gaze penetrated to the very heart, how a slight smile seemed like an invitation to freedom from the oppressive framework of everyday life. But at the same time, every memory evoked pain, a sense of guilt that was so inherent in her life, and fear that she might lose the part of herself that had been associated with familiar routine for so long. Caroline involuntarily wondered, how can one be both a prisoner of the past and a seeker of something new, something not yet fully known? Her thoughts flowed like a quiet river, slowly but inevitably approaching the threshold of change. She analyzed every moment of the meeting with Dylan, trying to understand what made it so attractive, why it was at that moment that a fire ignited within her, which she had tried to extinguish for so long. In every touch, in every exchange of glances, she saw a reflection of long-forgotten dreams of passion and sincerity, dreams that once made her heart beat faster. But with this came the realization. Such a feeling could become the beginning of the destruction of the familiar world, a world where everything seems stable and predictable, albeit devoid of life. In the silence of the night, Caroline began to doubt the truth of her feelings. Could this quiet call for change be just a figment of her imagination, an illusion caused by long solitude? Or on the contrary, was it a signal sent to her by fate itself so that she would not remain forever in the shackles of familiar comfort, which had become a cage for her? She sifted through memories of moments when her entire life seemed to flow according to a pre-written script, leaving no room for surprises and risk. But now, as the world around her suddenly took on new colors, she understood. Behind every spark could lie a real opportunity. Sitting by the window, Caroline felt a quiet revolution taking place within her. Every thought, every image that surfaced, whether a memory of the past or a premonition of the future, created new contours of her inner world. She realized that she could no longer remain an indifferent observer of her own life. This moment, filled with doubts and warm hope at the same time, became her starting point. A starting point to acknowledge her desires, accept her vulnerability, and take the first step toward the changes that had long been hidden deep in her soul. One of those evenings when the house seemed to sink into silent emptiness due to Richard's absence, the tension accumulated in Caroline's soul reached its limit. In the silence of the evening hours, when the familiar noise of daily cares gave way to a deep, almost tangible anticipation, she found herself not alone. Dylan, whose presence increasingly turned from fleeting flirtation into something much more significant, was nearby, like a ghost of her suppressed desires. In the narrow corridor, where the soft light of dimmed lamps cast long shadows on the walls, a special atmosphere of forbidden attraction hung between them. Time seemed to slow down. Caroline felt her heart, usually restrained and measured, begin to beat faster, and her breathing became shallow and rapid. Every glance, every barely noticeable touch seemed to convey unspoken words and reveal the most intimate thoughts. Dylan took a step closer, and their gazes met in silent agreement for a moment that seemed to last forever. In this brief interval, all familiar rules and prohibitions dissolved, giving way only to that irresistible feeling that raged within each of them. Caroline felt her hands trembling involuntarily, and for a moment, the whole world narrowed down to the two of them. It was a moment filled not only with physical tension, but also with inner struggle, a clash between the past, when she was bold and sincere, and the present, where routine and duty blurred her feelings. In a quiet corner of the house, far from prying eyes and the sounds of everyday life, a moment occurred when all unresolved desires, embarrassments, and fears found their expression. A soft sigh, a barely perceptible touch of hands that conveyed both tenderness and insistence. All this merged into a single stream of sensations. Caroline could not precisely determine whether this was a realization that forbidden attraction was becoming a source of strength for her, or just a fleeting illusion capable of destroying the familiar order of life. But at that moment, it didn't matter to her. Every moment was filled with meaning, and every movement spoke of changes that were already beginning to penetrate her heart. This brief encounter, so emotionally and psychologically charged, left an indelible mark on Caroline's soul. She felt a boldness awakening within her to be herself, even if it meant breaking long-established boundaries. And although she understood that the consequences of such a step could be far from simple, a spark of a new beginning already glimmered in her eyes. A spark ready to turn the forbidden into an opportunity for inner rebirth. In this quiet, almost sacred moment, when the forbidden became reality, Caroline realized, sometimes to truly feel the taste of life, one must take a risk and step beyond the familiar world, even if that step is full of contradictions and pain. After that night, when the forbidden touch with Dylan left an unhealed scar on Caroline's soul, a day filled with a strange mix of euphoria and bewilderment arrived. Waking up early in the morning, she still felt the echo of that quiet but powerful moment when physical contact turned into a whirlwind of emotions. Every minute of the new day seemed permeated with memories of how her hands first met Dylan's, and this memory filled her with both sweet pleasure and the bitterness of realizing that life would never be the same. Throughout the day, Caroline seemed to live two lives simultaneously. On one hand, she tried to return to the familiar routine, making coffee, doing small household chores, but every movement, every glance in the mirror reminded her of what had happened. In her reflection, she saw not only fatigue, but also a growing determination, a vague hope for change. Questions that had long been suppressed constantly echoed in her thoughts. How can I regain that spark that once illuminated my heart? And swing, can I live without fear of feeling? These questions, like a soft whisper, filled her mind and made her heart beat faster. Richard's lack of attention, her husband, only intensified the inner conflict. His usual indifference gave her both a sense of liberation and a deep longing for the lost warmth. Caroline realized that that brief moment of closeness with Dylan had become a signal for her, a sign that her soul demanded change, that within her still lived a desire to be heard and loved. In the evening, hiding in the silence of her room, she opened her diary and began to write down her thoughts, trying to unravel the complex tangle of emotions that had stirred within her after the meeting. Every line of her entry was filled with the painful realization that she could no longer live by the old rules. She described the trembling in her hands, the rapid breathing, the heavy heart, as if shrouded in fog, which seemed to be trying to escape the shackles of the past. In her diary entries, the words of sincere pain and hope resounded, for she understood. Every experienced moment was a step towards awakening. Caroline realized that her inner world would never be the same again, that something new and bright, albeit frightening in its unknown nature, was being born in her soul. This new world was full of contradictions, both the sweet memory of closeness and the bitter longing for the stability she had left behind. When evening fell again on the city, and the flickering lights of the mansion began to reflect in her windows, Caroline felt a soft but confident note of change resonating in her soul. The echoes of that night continued to sound in her memory, reminding her that every spark, even the most forbidden, could become the beginning of a new life. And although the fear of the unknown still pursued her, an inner strength was awakening, ready to overcome doubts and lead her to a true awakening, to a life filled with passion and sincerity. With the first rays of the morning sun, when the sky of Chicago was illuminated with soft shades of pink and gold, Caroline stood by the large window of the mansion and felt the new day penetrating the very heart of her soul. In this quiet awakening, she sensed that the time for change had finally come. After nights filled with inner storms and forbidden touches, her consciousness, as if cleansed of the weight of past grievances, began to beat with new strength. Caroline's gaze, reflected in the mirror, was no longer the sign of a cold, silent woman, chained by routine and indifference. Before her stood a strong and confident person, one who had accepted her vulnerability, rejected old excuses, and decided to step towards a life full of true feelings. Her thoughts, like bright reflections of the morning sun, dispelled the darkness of doubts and fears that remained after the experienced moments of closeness with Dylan and the painful realization of the rift in her marriage with Richard. Richard, immersed in the world of business affairs, already seemed like something distant, an echo of the past that could no longer determine her fate. Caroline understood that she deserved much more than just existing according to someone else's rules. Every moment of the new morning reminded her that real life begins when we dare to be ourselves, when we allow ourselves to feel and dream, even if it involves risk and pain. Wrapped in the gentle rays of the rising sun, Caroline took a deep breath and softly said, "Today I begin to live for myself." With this simple yet powerful statement, she marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter in which every second would be filled with meaning, and her soul would finally find the long-awaited freedom. Against the backdrop of the gentle city noise, which was already beginning to awaken, silence reigned in her room, capable of telling about the great changes taking place within her. At that moment, she remembered all those nights when the forbidden feeling awakened in her, not only a thirst for change, but also the pain of losing the familiar, known world. However, it was this pain that became the impetus for her inner rebirth. Now looking at the awakening city, Caroline felt that ahead of her lay new trials, new meetings, and perhaps new love, one that would not imprison her in old routines, but would allow her to feel the taste of life once again. Leaving behind fears and doubts, she took the first decisive step toward the future, in which every spark, even the most forbidden, could become the beginning of a new life. Under the gentle rays of the morning sun, Caroline stepped towards her renewed self, knowing that true strength comes from inner awakening, from the courage to live, love, and dream truly. Thus, the new dawn illuminated not only the city, but also her soul, opening the doors to new opportunities, sincere feelings, and free, true existence. The end of that night became the starting point of her eternal awakening, and with each new day, Caroline became more and more convinced that she had finally found herself.